I like to tackle the more esoteric aspects of being an audiophile. So today we are going to take a look at more cables. Also, those are from Ricable, a company that actually convinced me with their quality and their policies. Those cables are named the Dedalus Elite for speakers. They are priced at $950 for a pair, which is what we have here. This pair has 3 meters. They are cheaper for a shorter pair and they get more expensive if you need a longer length. You can even request a personalized length from Ricable and they will tell you the pricing. So for a pair of cables, I don't know how to make them sit in the video. Speaking about the connectors, those are spades, not banana connectors, and they are of a good quality. They don't scratch easily. The cable has multiple layers of insulation from noise, from electromagnetic interference, from other types of noise, and the whole purpose of getting a cable is connecting your speakers to your power amplifier. At least this is what speaker cables are made for. While it is a more esoteric part of this hobby to have high-end cables, I know for a fact that it is pleasing to see high-quality cables in your setup. It is pleasing to see a high-quality connector between the one that provides the power and the one that provides the sound, which is the speaker. Typically, when you think of pricey cables, you think of extremely pricey cables, but there are companies which can offer you a good product, a sturdy product, and a high-quality product, which is priced naturally. I mean, a pair of Dedalus Elite is about $1,000, so you will likely not want to put this in a $1,000 setup. You would more likely purchase this for a setup which costs over $10,000 or more. You should include high quality cables for a system which can take advantage of them. Usually I like to have a rule that the cable is the last aspect that I upgrade in a listening chain. So I'm not going to tell you go purchase expensive cables if you don't have a high-end pair of speakers, a high-end amplifier, a high-end DAC already. That being said, usually most people do have devices that produce electromagnetic interference in the room. For example, my cables would have to go from the power amplifier, which is about there. I'm pointing at it. Then they go beneath my PC, beneath my television. They go beneath about 10 to 20 DACs, amps, and other audio components at the same time. So in my situation, I am quite sensitive to electromagnetic interference. Most cheap cables tend to have a bit of it. This being said, we are comparing a $1,000 pair of cables to a $100 pair of okay quality cables from Amazon. Typically this is what I do, but I did review the Ricable Invictus speaker reference cable, which was really pleasing to the ear. They do have their own sound, and the way I checked for whether they have a sound signature or not is that I connected one of the better cables to a speaker and the other cable to the other speaker, then undid the connection, did it the other way around, then I connected each set of cables to the speakers, then did the connection again. So through all of those tests, I took notes and I eventually figured out how each cable sounds like. Because it's quite hard to tell them apart, I am not going to tell you otherwise. They are finer nuances in the sound and the differences are not very huge. For example, two pair of speakers will sound drastically different. There are no two pair of speakers that sound very similar out there, or two amplifiers, or two DACs. Although with the DACs, they tend to be much more similar than amps and speakers. So the highest difference is in the speakers, then the amps, then the DACs, then the accessories and interconnects. It is what it is. Ricable has one of the strongest customer policies out there. You have 60 days to decide whether you keep those or not, and whether you believe in burn-in or not. I did allow them to get some burn-in, but I personally haven't experienced a lot of burn-in with cables. With 60 days, you have time to let them burn in. You have time to experiment with them, and you have time to order a pair, see if it fits in your system, and if you aren't happy with the results, you can just send it back to Ricable. They will refund you the full amount that you paid if you purchase from their online store. The cables do have a directionality on them, and once again I tested that. I can't really hear a difference whether you connect the directionality correct or not, but with the cables I do hear a tuning and a signature. So this is where things get interesting. First off, I am noticing a quieter noise floor. With my other Amazon purchased cables, I purchased Amazon Basics copper cables. The Amazon Basics copper cables tend to have a bit of background noise. I tend to hear some kind of interference at times, which is completely nullified when using the Ricable Dedalus Elite. This one has absolutely zero noise. I like the aspect a bit better. This is a thick cable, but it's still pretty flexible, not quite like the Invictus. Invictus speaker reference from Ricable was really heavy, really large, and it was not very flexible. If you need something sleeker, then the Ricable Dedalus Elite does feel sleek, it is more flexible and easier to handle around the room. Also, because it is lighter, it doesn't put so much pressure on the connectors. While with most amplifiers that is not an issue, it could be an issue with your speakers, which tend to have not necessarily more fragile, but more exposed connectors than the power amplifier. So lighter connectors is a good thing for a long-lasting setup. Once you connect the cables, you are ready to go. The actual physical operation is quite simple, and most of the differences between entry-level and high-end cables are found in the tuning. But right before we speak about what cables do and what their sound is like, I have to point this out. The quality of a cable is actually important, not just in audiophile and in our applications, but in everyday life usage. So here I have a Baseus cable, which is supposed to deliver 240 watts of power. I purchased this from AliExpress, hoping that it would upgrade the cable I was using for charging my smartphone. I have been using a very old TNB cable. I don't even think the company exists out there. It was something I purchased from a Kaufland in Romania, like a grocery shop. And this Baseus cable, actually, I was hoping that it would be charging the batteries for my lights until now, and it seems it does not. So the charger doesn't really work with this cable. I suppose it is not providing enough current, so the quality of the cable is important. You have to purchase a good cable, and not necessarily a brand cable is always a good one, as I have noticed when I purchased an AudioQuest HDMI cable to connect my computer to my display. And what I found out is that the AudioQuest cable was not supporting 4K and 60 Hz properly, and 4K and 120, it was not supported at all. So just go with something which has good reviews, which was used by others and which is known to be good. Don't go necessarily for a brand something if it's not known to work well. Now that we've thrown that Baseus cable away, we should talk about the Ricable Dedalus Speaker Elite. When I reviewed the Invictus speaker reference, I was amazed by how clean, crisp, and also what a strong dynamic range it had. It was one of the most high-resolution cables that I've heard. I actually heard an improvement in the actual revealing ability of the speakers I was using at that time. I was using a KLH Model 5. Now I'm using a pair of Pylon Diamond 30 Mark II speakers. They are different speakers, and there is a difference between the cables and how speakers interact with them, because the KLH Model 5 was quite bright and quite strong in the treble. The Pylon audio isn't. It is quite balanced actually, so there is no actual coloration that I can talk about. So the cable actually brings in a coloration. Electrically speaking, it should have some kind of filtering, and it does have an active filtering. It is stated on the Ricable website, but the effect that it has is more like it softens the transients a bit, so textures become a bit softer. Instead of them sounding like prrr, they sound like prrr. Everything just is a bit softer, a bit smoother. The treble is not quite as strong and not quite as fatiguing. The treble is a bit warmer, also the bass is a bit warmer, also the bass speed is a bit slower. This results in a sound which is rather pleasing and rather inviting for the music lover, but it's also a bit more relaxed, where I was commenting that the Ricable Invictus speaker reference was amazing in resolution, in detail, and it was really pleasing to listen to if you are a treble and a detail addict. The new Dedalus Elite does have the same level of dynamic and resolution, but it presents everything just softer and more filtered. Everything just sounds smoother, silkier. It is a more relaxed presentation, which was surprising because I was expecting that Ricable would have a house sound, everything would sound the same, but no. Each cable seems to color the sound of the speakers in its own way. Since I am using the Invictus speaker reference and the Amazon cables as references, because this one is the new one which I'm reviewing, I would say that actually this would work. But because typically when you are trying to implement a cable, you want it to not bring necessarily more coloration but allow for more transparency, the Dedalus Speaker Elite actually allows you to hear details better if you were fatigued by the old tuning and signature. This is important because typically we tend to close off our hearing and close off our senses when we are overwhelmed. And this is what I think happens when you listen to a system which is too bright or too revealing or just too sharp in the sound. For example, with the Pylon Audio Diamond 30 Mark II, I feel like the sound is softer. I can pump the volume higher and I get a woolier, smoother, fuller bass, but I don't feel like the improvement is in the details and the resolution. While with KLH Model 5, which sounds much brighter, much more energetic, and it jumps right at you, I feel like the sound is far easier to enjoy and far easier to listen to. The two cables from Ricable that I've reviewed so far have a really different tuning, so you should expect each cable to provide a sound that would color the speakers in some way. It is expected that even the cheaper ones would have different tunings, although that would be an interesting subject for a future video. Until that moment comes though, I do hope that if you decide to go for the Ricable Dedalus Speaker Elite, you will take into account you have lifetime warranty, you have 60 days to return the cable. With this cable, you will be able to tone down the aggressiveness and overall violence in the speakers a bit. You will be able to make the treble a bit smoother, the bass a bit fuller and a bit warmer, and the entire sound a bit easier to digest and to hear. Thank you so much for watching. If you have comments and advice for me, please type them down. Also, if you want to see more content, it would help me a lot if you could subscribe to the channel. Liking this video also helps a lot. Thank you so much for watching and we'll see each other really soon. Bye bye.